I smiled when I told them, carefully, hopefully, that I'd be retiring this summer. I even mentioned the pottery studio I'd dreamed about for years. My son chuckled. His wife actually laughed. "Just don't go overboard," he said. "We might need it later." Later. Like I was a savings account, not a mother. I stirred my cold coffee, folded my napkin, and realized something they didn't. I was retiring. Yes, but not just from work. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The brunch reservation had taken a week to secure. Nora had chosen a place with white tablecloths, real flowers on the tables, and thick, comforting walls that softened the sound of other people's lives. She wore her good blazer, the navy one with subtle pinstripes, and even ran a curling iron through her graying hair that morning. It had felt important to look resolved, ready, a woman stepping into the chapter she'd earned. Greg arrived 10 minutes late, with the kind of rushed energy that used to belong to a man juggling responsibilities. But now, Nora could tell, it was just habit. He wasn't rushing from anything important. He slid into the booth and gave her a one-armed hug while still glancing at his phone screen. Tessa was already there, already sipping something fizzy and pink, already filming the cinnamon sugar rim of her drink for a story captioned, "Brunch Vibes." They barely noticed that Nora had ordered only coffee. She waded through the small talk, the commentary about parking, Tessa's brief rant about a boutique returns policy, and Greg's vague complaints about property taxes. Nora kept nodding, one hand resting on her purse, waiting for the lull. When it came, she reached into her bag and pulled out a smooth, dark red folder. The kind financial planners used when they wanted something to feel official. "I wanted to tell you both something," she began, offering a small, hopeful smile. "It's not dramatic. Just something I've been looking forward to." Greg leaned back, sipping his orange juice. Tessa blinked, then pressed her phone face down on the table, her version of giving someone attention. "I'm retiring this summer," Nora said, her voice calm, careful. "June 15th. 40 years in administration is enough. I've run the numbers. Several times, believe me. And I'm ready. I even started planning a little studio where I can teach pottery. Nothing fancy. Just a space with sunlight and a kiln." Tessa's expression cracked first. She made a sound somewhere between a snort and a giggle, and covered her mouth with the back of her hand. "You," she said, raising both eyebrows. "Retire." Greg laughed too, less loud, more reflexive. "Wow, Mom, just make sure you don't go overboard, okay? Save enough. In case things come up. Like emergencies, or grandkids." Nora tilted her head slightly like she hadn't quite heard him right. But she had. "I have," she said evenly. "Planned, I mean." Tessa leaned in, her elbow brushing against her mimosa. "Don't worry," she said with a too bright smile. "We'll take care of everything when you're, you know." She twirled a finger in a vague little circle, then laughed again. "You're not going anywhere soon, obviously. But it's good you're thinking ahead." Nora didn't answer right away. She simply folded her napkin, each edge lined up with quiet precision, her fingertips smoothing down the linen in practiced motions. Her gaze didn't rise to meet theirs. She was suddenly aware of how loud the clinking cutlery had become, how the jazz in the background now felt like static. Her food sat cooling in front of her, untouched. "Of course," she said softly. Greg reached over and grabbed the check as the waiter placed it down, but then hesitated. His hand hovered. Nora reached for it first, signing the receipt with the same composed hand that had signed contracts, approvals, and legal files for nearly half a lifetime. The pen barely trembled. Not yet. They stood, and Tessa leaned in with the kind of kiss that left no warmth behind. "Don't stress about money," she said in a sing-song whisper near Nora's cheek. We've got you covered eventually. Outside, the sky was bright and blue, the kind of spring day that should have felt like promise. But something else settled in Nora's chest instead. A stillness, like something had just ended, and no one else had noticed. Back at home, she opened the folder again on her kitchen table, staring at the same printed spreadsheets she had once taken such pride in preparing. The numbers hadn't changed, but something else had. She picked up her pen and scribbled something in the margin of the first page. Just 2 words. New plan. The Garden Cafe sat tucked behind a nursery off Glenwood Avenue, a small sanctuary of ivy, wind chimes, and the low hum of bees drifting through the hanging baskets. Nora and Pam had been coming here for years, since their days at Wake County General, when they'd split a single slice of carrot cake and vented about upper management. It was where big decisions always seemed to find their shape, even when Nora wasn't ready to admit she'd made them. Now, with the memory of that brunch still echoing in her ears, Nora stirred her tea until it went cold. She hadn't slept much the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound of Tessa's laughter, the disbelief in it, the cruelty so casual it hadn't even known its name. Pam arrived 10 minutes late, wearing her usual linen tunic and big amber earrings, the kind that swung when she walked. She spotted Nora instantly, her sharp eyes narrowing as she sat down. "You look like someone who's been holding her breath for a week," she said, pulling off her sunglasses. "All right. What happened?" Nora hesitated, her fingers tightening around her teacup. "Greg and Tessa, we had brunch yesterday." Pam arched an eyebrow. "That already sounds like a threat." "They laughed," Nora said softly. "I told them about my retirement, about the pottery studio I want to start." Tessa laughed. "Greg did too. Told me not to spend too much in case they needed it later." Her voice barely carried across the small table, but it trembled with something raw, something dangerously close to humiliation. "And then she said, they'd take care of things when I'm—" She waved her hand, unable to finish. Pam's expression hardened, a flicker of protective anger crossing her face. "They see you as a bank," she said flatly, "not a mom." Nora swallowed hard. The words landed like truth she'd already known but hadn't wanted to hear. "I spent 40 years planning for peace," she murmured. "Apparently, I was planning for them." Pam leaned forward, resting her elbows on the wrought iron table. "You don't owe them a damn thing, Nora. You built your life. You can decide who gets to share it." For a long moment, Nora said nothing. The breeze carried the smell of basil and damp soil. Somewhere, a fountain trickled lazily over river stones. Then, without a word, Nora reached for her napkin and flattened it against the table. She pulled a pen from her purse, the same blue ink rollerball she used for signing administrative forms, and began sketching lines. "This is my income," she said quietly, drawing tidy rows. "Pension, investments, savings, the house, my emergency fund." Pam watched, eyes narrowing with a hint of admiration. "You're actually mapping this out right now?" "I need to see it," Nora said, more to herself than to Pam. She added small notes beside each category, every figure written with exact precision. This was supposed to pass to Greg: joint accounts, beneficiary designations, all clean, all easy. Then, slowly, she drew a firm, straight line through her son's name. The motion was surgical. There was no anger in it, just certainty. Pam let out a low whistle. "You really are a silent assassin with a spreadsheet." Nora's mouth curved slightly. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was something steadier than before. "You used to call me that when I corrected payroll errors." "I meant it as a compliment then, too," Pam said, grinning. The waitress stopped by to refill their glasses of water. Oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding over napkins and scones, Nora waited until she'd gone, then reached into her bag for her phone. Her banking app opened with the smooth, impersonal precision she'd always loved, numbers and options, clean and logical, unbothered by emotion. She navigated to the Shared Access tab. Greg's name appeared there, a relic from years ago, back when trust came easily. Her thumb hovered above the toggle. "Are you sure?" Pam asked softly. Nora nodded. I was sure the moment she laughed. She pressed disable. The notification confirmed the change with a neutral chime. Just like that, the link between her and her son's financial privileges was gone. No fireworks, no drama, just a simple erasure. The silence that followed was oddly satisfying, like closing a drawer that had been stuck for too long. Pam lifted her teacup in a mock toast. "To freedom," she said. Nora raised hers too, the corners of her mouth tightening with something close to resolve. "To finally being seen for who I am." But as she sipped, a new thought formed in her mind. Steady, deliberate, unstoppable. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about taking her name back from the people who'd mistaken it for an account number. The next morning, Nora stood in the glass-paneled lobby of Yates Financial Planning, clutching a folder that felt heavier than it should. Outside, the air was brisk and damp, the kind of Raleigh morning that smelled faintly of rain and new mulch. Inside, the office hummed with the muted clicks of keyboards and the faint rustle of paperwork, professional efficiency wrapped in air-conditioned calm. Tom Yates had been her advisor for nearly 12 years. He was younger than Nora by a decade, but he carried himself with a kind of practiced patience that made clients feel steadied. He'd helped her roll over accounts, navigate insurance renewals, and even plan for the modest home upgrades she'd done after her husband died. Tom was steady ground, which was exactly what Nora needed now. He rose from behind his desk as she entered, offering a polite smile and an outstretched hand. "Nora, it's been a while. Retirement planning still on track?" "It's on track," she said, sliding the folder across his desk. "I'm changing a few things." Tom's smile softened as he gestured for her to sit. His office was lined with mahogany shelves filled with small financial awards and framed family photos. A woman, 2 teenage kids, a golden retriever with its tongue hanging out. A comfortable life, carefully budgeted. He opened the folder, eyes scanning the neatly labeled sections: IRAs, brokerage, equity, savings. Every tab reflected Nora's meticulous nature. "Everything looks solid," he said, flipping through. "You're one of the few clients who actually reads the fine print. What's changing?" Nora folded her hands on her lap, her wedding ring catching a slant of morning light. "Beneficiaries," she said simply. Tom's pen paused mid-note. "All right. Who are we adding?" "Not adding," she said. "Removing." That drew his eyes up. He studied her face for a moment, his tone shifting, gentle but careful. "Greg and Tessa?" "Yes," Nora said. "Both of them. I want everything restructured. Trusts, accounts, emergency contacts. Every document where their names appear." He leaned back slightly, considering her. "That's a major change, Nora." "I know. Usually people just update percentages or add a contingency clause." "This isn't about percentages," she interrupted, voice even. "It's about clarity." For a moment, the only sound in the office was the soft whir of the ceiling vent. Tom adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file again, tapping his pen lightly against the edge. "All right," he said at last. "Let's walk through it then." He started with her IRA, steady growth, well managed, then her brokerage account, her home equity line, her emergency savings. Each page was a map of her discipline, her years of restraint. Every decision she'd made had been about creating a future for Greg: college, marriage, stability. Now, Each number felt like an invisible debt she'd already repaid 100 times over. Tom cleared his throat. "You've listed Greg and Tessa as emergency beneficiaries on most of these accounts," he said. "They'd be the automatic transfer recipients. Removing them means the system will ask for replacements." "I'll think about replacements later," Nora said. "Right now, I just want their names gone." He hesitated, then gave a small nod. "You're serious?" I was serious the moment they laughed. Tom leaned back, hands clasped loosely. "You realize this could cause some friction, if they ever find out." Nora met his eyes, calm and steady. "I'm counting on it." That earned her a quiet exhale, a mix between disbelief and admiration. "You know," he said finally, "in my line of work, awkward usually means expensive family dinners and long explanations. You're past that, I take it?" "Way past," she said, the faintest trace of a smile ghosting across her face. "I'm not explaining anything to anyone who thinks my piece is their inheritance." Tom chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You're going to make my week interesting." "Good," she said. "Let's make it official." He pulled a few forms from the drawer, sliding them across the desk. The pages smelled faintly of ink and toner. Fresh. Decisive. Nora signed each one slowly, her pen movements deliberate, her posture relaxed. By the time she placed the final signature, a subtle shift had taken place in her expression. The tension that had been knotted in her shoulders for years now sat somewhere else. Quiet, purposeful, under control. Tom gathered the paperwork, clipping it together. "All right, Nora. Everything's set. This," he tapped the folder lightly, "is going to get awkward." She reached for her purse, standing up with calm poise. "Good," she said. "It's time they got uncomfortable." He smiled faintly as she turned toward the door. "For what it's worth," he said, "I've seen a lot of people plan for retirement, but I think you're the only one I've seen plan for freedom." Nora paused, her hand resting on the doorknob. The sunlight from the lobby spilled across her blazer sleeve, warm and steady. "I'm done asking permission to live my life," she said softly. "Now I'm planning to enjoy it." The next afternoon, Nora parked in front of Raleigh First Savings, the same brick front branch she'd used since her first paycheck in 1984. The magnolia trees outside had just begun to bloom, their petals scattered across the parking lot like fallen envelopes. She sat for a moment in the car, her fingers drumming on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at the reflection of her own face. Composed, but sharper now, as if the last few days had carved out a new version of her. Inside, the bank smelled faintly of lemon polish and printer ink. The fluorescent lights hummed, sterile but familiar. She'd always liked this branch. Its predictability, the faint echo of footsteps across the tile. It had been years since she'd walked in needing something personal. Most visits were routine. Deposits, transfers, polite small talk. Today wasn't routine. Today, she was here to reclaim access, not money, control. Vera Lynn, the branch manager, looked up from her desk the instant Nora entered. Her face broke into a warm smile. "Nora Beasley, I was just thinking I hadn't seen you in a while." She rose, smoothing her blazer, the kind of steady professionalism that came with decades in banking. Vera was in her early 40s, brisk and efficient, but with the kind of tact Nora had always admired. She had the memory of someone who knew the stories behind every signature. "Vera," Nora greeted, her tone polite but clipped. "I need to make some changes to my accounts." "Of course." Vera gestured to her glass office. "Let's sit down." The door clicked softly shut behind them, muting the hum of the lobby. Vera pulled up Nora's profile on the monitor, her nails tapping efficiently against the keyboard. "So, what are we updating today?" Nora opened her file folder, revealing a neatly typed list. "I want to remove an authorized user, Greg Beasley from every linked account, including the safe deposit box. Vera's fingers froze mid-keystroke. Understood. Give me one moment. She scrolled, scanning the account permissions. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Nora. He hasn't accessed it recently, she said carefully. But yes, he's still listed as authorized. Nora nodded slowly, her jaw tightening just a fraction. Then let's fix that. Vera adjusted her glasses, her tone turning discreet. Just confirming. It's your son, correct? It is. Nora's voice was calm. And it's still my money. Something softened in Vera's eyes. An unspoken understanding. She nodded once and began typing again. I'll initiate the removal. You'll need to sign a couple of documents and verify a few security questions. While Vera worked, Nora glanced around the office. The walls were lined with framed certificates, decades of policy updates, compliance awards, staff recognition photos. The room smelled faintly of toner and citrus air freshener. It felt stable, reliable, like the kind of place that remembered who you were when the rest of the world started forgetting. Vera turned the monitor slightly toward Nora. We'll need to set new safeguards as well. I can add a digital alert any time your account is accessed externally, and a secondary verification layer for large transactions. Would you like that? Yes, Nora said. Every one of them. Vera typed quickly, nodding. I'll flag this for privacy oversight too, just in case. Quietly, of course. Nora allowed herself a small breath. Thank you, Vera. I appreciate that. It's no trouble, Vera replied, her voice softer now. You've been a client here longer than I've been working. People forget that sometimes. Longevity earns privacy. As the printer spat out fresh forms, Nora noticed the old safe deposit key still attached to her keychain, a tiny brass relic from another era. It had once symbolized safety, family trust, permanence. Now it felt like a loose thread. She signed the removal form and placed the key gently on the desk. I'll be needing a new one, she said. Just mine this time. Vera collected it with both hands, treating it with quiet respect. We'll issue a replacement and update the system. I'll also change your digital passphrases. Do you still want to use family birthdays? Nora gave a short, dry laugh. No. Let's make it something harder to guess. She paused, thinking for a moment, then smiled faintly. Use the Latin word for boundary. I'll remember it. Vera entered the update without comment, but the corner of her mouth curved knowingly. That's fitting. When it was done, she pushed the paperwork toward Nora. All finished. The changes will process within 24 hours. I'll flag your profile personally, privately. Nora picked up the pen and signed, her handwriting neat, unhurried. Each loop of ink was an act of closure. When she slid the papers back across the desk, her fingers didn't tremble. Not even a little. Vera gathered the documents and met her gaze. You'd be surprised how many people come in here trying to hold things together, she said quietly. But the ones who let go, those are the ones who walk out lighter. Nora smiled faintly. I'm aiming to travel light. She stood, shaking Vera's hand firmly before walking toward the exit. The sun outside was brighter now, spilling through the glass like new resolve. As she stepped into the light, she caught her reflection again in the bank's glass door. Steadier, surer, untouched by hesitation. 2 days later, Nora sat once again in Tom Yates's office, this time without the quiet uncertainty that had followed her last visit. The spring sunlight stretched across the polished floor, throwing long, clean rectangles of gold across the rug. Nora placed a new folder on the desk, thinner than before, but heavier with purpose. Tom looked up from his computer and smiled faintly. You're back sooner than I expected. Don't tell me you missed the paperwork. I'm making one more adjustment, Nora said. Her tone was calm, the kind of calm that came when a decision had already been made, and all that was left was to formalize it. Tom gestured for her to sit. "All right. What are we adjusting?" "The trust," she said. "It was written to convert to Greg and Tessa upon my death. I want that clause removed." He blinked once, the way someone does when they're not sure they heard correctly. "Removed. As in?" "As in," she said, folding her hands neatly on the table. "They're no longer beneficiaries. I've already cleared their access from my accounts. I want the trust dissolved in its current form and reassigned." Tom leaned back slightly, a slow exhale escaping him. He wasn't surprised. Not exactly. But he was measuring the seriousness in her voice and the resolve in her eyes. "You've thought this through." "For longer than I realized," she replied. "I used to think planning for my son was the same as planning for my future. Turns out, I was just planning for his expectations." He gave a small, respectful nod. "Then where's it going instead?" Nora opened her folder and slid across a single-page document. The letterhead read, Children's Medical Foundation of North Carolina, a local hospital charity known for its neonatal and pediatric outreach programs. Tom's eyebrows rose slightly as he read. "A full transfer?" he asked. "Yes. Upon my passing. I want every cent to go there." He flipped through the attached paperwork. "That's significant, Nora. This fund alone could finance a new wing." "Good," she said, her voice steady. "Then it'll do something worthwhile for once." Tom smiled faintly, a trace of admiration breaking through his professional reserve. "You know, I don't usually say this to clients, but this might be the most purposeful retirement move I've seen." Nora met his gaze evenly. "It's not revenge, Tom, it's clarity." He chuckled softly. "Whatever name you give it, it's efficient." He gathered the appropriate forms, printing new beneficiary agreements while Nora sat quietly, her thoughts strangely calm. The low hum of the printer filled the space. Through the glass wall, she could see other clients meeting with advisors, couples talking about mortgages, young parents planning savings for children who would one day forget to call them. It made her smile, wry, understanding, detached. She'd lived that cycle, paid for it, and was now finally stepping out of it. When the printer clicked off, Tom slid the documents across the desk. "You'll need a witness and a notary for the estate plan amendment," he said. "I can provide one, or—" "I already have one," Nora interrupted. "Pam's meeting me this afternoon." He nodded approvingly. "Of course she is." Nora signed each page with measured intent, pausing only once, to write a small note in the margin of the estate summary, right beneath the removed beneficiary section. Her cursive was crisp, decisive. Greg removed by choice. When she finished, Tom gathered the stack and tapped it into alignment, clipping it neatly. "Everything will be filed within 48 hours. You'll get confirmation from both the state and the charity." Nora stood, smoothing her blazer. "Thank you, Tom." He offered a hand, his grip steady. "You're doing something brave. Most people never get to define their own legacy." "Maybe not," she said, "but they should." That afternoon, Nora met Pam at the county notary office, a quiet, beige-walled building that smelled faintly of toner and disinfectant. Pam breezed in wearing a turquoise scarf and a look that suggested she already knew what Nora was up to. "So," Pam said, glancing at the document before signing her witness line, "no more family beneficiaries?" Nora shook her head. "No more illusions either." Pam whistled low. "You really did it. You took back your life in legal ink." "I took back the right to be ungrateful," Nora said softly, capping her pen. Pam laughed. "Now that's power." Later that evening, back home, Nora settled into her armchair with a cup of chamomile tea. Her email pinged, a new notification from social media. She clicked without thinking and immediately regretted it. It was a post from Tessa. A photo of an immaculate white nursery filled with designer baby clothes and a high-end stroller, tagged with a glittering caption, manifesting generational wealth. Your family goals, dash dash blessed. Nora stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the laptop with deliberate calm. She took another sip of her tea and exhaled through her nose. Manifest all you want, she murmured. It's not mine anymore. It began with the first voicemail. Nora heard it while watering her ferns that Monday morning, the sound of Greg's voice echoing through the kitchen from her phone, calm but tight around the edges. Hey, Mom, just checking in. Haven't heard from you. Tessa mentioned something about you updating your accounts? I figured that's probably a misunderstanding. Call me back, okay? He hung up before the line could betray the strain creeping into his tone. Nora turned the phone face down on the counter and returned to misting her plants. The light streaming through the kitchen window glowed soft and golden against the ceramic pots she'd made herself. Every leaf, every small act of care, steadied her more than any apology could. By noon, the second voicemail came. His voice had changed, louder, more brittle. Mom, I'm serious. Tessa just got an alert. Something about the trust being modified. We need to talk about this. You can't just... Look, I'm sure there's a reason, just call me, please. She didn't. Instead, she sat at her desk and opened a spreadsheet she hadn't touched in months, reviewing balances, transfers, and security updates. Every figure confirmed what she already knew. Her life was finally hers, unlinked, clean. Then came the third voicemail, late evening. No hesitation now, just anger masked as panic. I can't believe you'd do this, Mom. After everything. You think you can just cut us off like that? Tessa's pregnant, we're trying to plan for the baby, and you're... God, I don't even know what you're thinking. This isn't you. Nora stood by the window while his voice filled the room. Outside, dusk had deepened into a soft navy sky, and the first fireflies blinked over her flower beds. She let the message play to the end, the anger spilling into silence. Then she deleted all three. No hesitation. Moments later, her email pinged. Venmo request, $1,200. Family expenses. The note came from Tessa's account, her profile picture showing a wide smile, hand resting delicately over her rounded belly. Nora stared at it for a full minute, her expression unreadable. Then she clicked decline and shut the laptop. Her tea had gone cold. She didn't mind. The next afternoon, Pam dropped by unannounced, carrying a paper bag that smelled faintly of Thai food and moral support. I brought Pad CU and gossip, she said cheerfully, slipping off her sunglasses. You're early, Nora said, smiling despite herself. I figured you'd need a friendly face after detonating your legacy. Pam set the food down and perched on the counter stool. You know, you've started a trend. I just updated my own will this morning. My nephew's getting cut off, and the Humane Society is about to love me. Nora laughed, a small, honest sound. You're impossible. Efficient, Pam corrected, waving her fork. There's a difference. They ate in companionable quiet for a few minutes. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the window panes, a rhythmic comfort. When Pam glanced toward the hallway table and saw the phone turned face down again, she didn't ask. They're calling? She said simply. 3 times, Nora replied. Pam nodded. And? I listened, Nora said. And I kept listening, to the silence that came after. Pam studied her friend for a long moment. You know, it's wild, how peace can sound like defiance when you're used to being interrupted. Nora smiled faintly. It's my new favorite sound. That night, long after Pam left, Nora heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel outside. The porch light cast a dull amber glow across the driveway, illuminating a familiar sedan parked too close to her rose bushes. Greg. Her heartbeat stayed steady, though. She didn't move toward the window. Instead, she stood perfectly still in the hallway, listening. A car door slammed, footsteps approached, a shadow crossed her porch. Then, 3 knocks. Firm, too familiar. Nora? His voice carried through the wood, not Mom, just her name. We need to talk. You can't keep ignoring me. She didn't answer. Nora! Louder now. He rattled the door handle. I know you're in there. Inside, she exhaled slowly, hands folded in front of her like she was in prayer. She wasn't frightened. She'd been frightened before. By bills, by loss, by loneliness. This was something else entirely. When the silence finally fell, it was deep and absolute. Then came the sound of retreat. Angry footsteps, the car door slamming again. Tires screeched against wet asphalt, spinning gravel onto her lawn as the taillights cut through the dark. Nora stood there until the sound faded. Then she turned off the porch light, drew the curtains closed, and went to the kitchen. The kettle was still half full. She turned it back on, listening as it began to hum and boil, the sound almost soothing. The following week, the house felt impossibly still. Rain had passed through Raleigh overnight, leaving behind a light mist that clung to the dogwoods and made her garden smell sharp and alive. Nora stood at her kitchen window, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching the slow drip of water off her wind chimes. She'd spent the last few days in silence. No calls, no messages, no apologies that meant anything. For the first time in months, that silence didn't ache. It expanded. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and pulled up the bookmarked page she'd been saving for years. Sedona Clay Collective. 2-week retreat for ceramic artists over 50. The photo banner showed red rock cliffs glowing in desert light. Pottery wheels spinning on open-air decks, hands covered in ochre clay. She'd once promised herself she'd go someday. Today, she clicked Book Now. Her cursor hovered over the travel options. Economy, refundable. First class, non-refundable. She smiled to herself, just slightly, and clicked first class. The day of the flight, she wore linen pants, soft sneakers, and her late husband's old travel watch. Its leather strap cracked, the face still ticking. The airport was crowded, the kind of early morning chaos she used to loathe, but now there was a strange freedom in moving unnoticed through it all. When she settled into her wide seat, a glass of orange juice already waiting, she felt the faintest thrill ripple through her chest. No one knew where she was going. No one had permission to. As the plane rose above the cloud cover, Raleigh shrank to a patchwork of rooftops and mist. Nora watched until it disappeared completely, until even the idea of being reachable felt small. Sedona was sun-baked serenity, raw cliffs, iron-red trails, and air that smelled faintly of sage and dry wind. The pottery studio sat at the edge of a canyon, the open windows framing a landscape that looked like it had been carved by time itself. On the first morning, Nora stood at a wheel beside 10 other women, most her age or older, all laughing softly as they shaped clay into something unrecognizable but promising. When the instructor handed her a lump of wet earth, she pressed her palms around it and felt her pulse settle. Clay was honest. It resisted when you forced it and yielded when you listened. She leaned into that rhythm, her hands sure, her mind quiet. Someone snapped a photo for the group's social page. Later that afternoon, Nora posted it on her own account, her hands coated in red clay, a faint smile on her face. Caption: Day 1 of retirement. Within an hour, the likes trickled in. Pam, of course, a few old colleagues, even her yoga instructor. Then one comment appeared, sharp against the calm. Tessa Beasley. Must be nice while your family struggles. Nora read it once, then again. Her finger hovered over the screen, and she simply pressed block. No anger, no rush of guilt, just Silence. The next morning, Pam's name popped up in her notifications instead. A sunny photo of the two of them grinning in oversized sun hats, iced tea in hand, the caption reading, "Proof that happiness looks better unshared." Nora laughed out loud for the first time in weeks, the kind of laugh that cracked something open inside her and let in light. On the fourth evening, she sat alone on the studio's back patio, watching the desert sunset bleed into shades of gold and wine red. The air cooled quickly after dusk, brushing against her skin like a secret. Around her, cicadas sang from somewhere unseen. Her phone buzzed, a single text from an unfamiliar number. "Ethan, why is Mom in the desert?" For a moment, she just stared at the words. Then she realized he'd texted Pam, not her. The message wasn't meant for her eyes, but somehow it found her anyway. A reminder that even from hundreds of miles away, they were still watching, still presuming. She took a slow sip of her wine and set the phone down on the railing, the screen glowing faintly against the darkening sky. "Because peace doesn't live in Raleigh," she murmured to no one. The morning Nora returned from Sedona, Raleigh greeted her with a thick, humid air that clung to her skin like an unwelcome reminder of routine. The house smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Plants thriving, mail stacked neatly, silence still holding. She unpacked slowly, carefully wrapping each of her new clay bowls in tissue before setting them on the kitchen counter. Her fingers still bore faint traces of red clay under the nails, the dessert somehow refusing to let her go. She smiled at the thought. It had taken 64 years to feel untethered. She wasn't about to give it back. By late afternoon, her phone chimed, a notification from Tom Yates. Subject: "Forwarding this to you. Ignore if you'd like." Nora opened it. Attached was a scanned letter stamped with the letterhead of Langston and Parker Family Law. The words were as polite as they were poisonous. "On behalf of our clients, Greg and Tessa Beasley, we are writing to express concern regarding recent and significant changes to the estate planning and financial structure of Ms. Nora Beasley. Given Ms. Beasley's age and recent travel patterns, our clients wish to ensure she has not been subject to undue influence or cognitive decline. We respectfully request confirmation of her mental and medical competency, as well as any relevant documentation validating these financial alterations." Nora read the paragraph twice. Her jaw didn't clench. Her pulse didn't rise. She simply exhaled, slowly, deliberately, and set the phone down beside her ceramic vase of sunflowers. Tom's reply sat right beneath the original. "You've officially made it to the lawyer letter phase. Don't worry, I've seen better blackmail attempts written in crayon." Nora let out a sound that wasn't quite laughter, but close. She walked to her desk, powered on her laptop, and opened a new document. The keys began to move beneath her fingers with the same rhythm she used to fill hospital reports. Clinical, exact, unyielding. 2. Langston and Parker Family Law. From Nora L. Beasley. Subject: response to your inquiry. Dear Counsel, I appreciate your concern regarding my financial and personal autonomy. Please note that all recent financial and estate adjustments were executed under the supervision of licensed professionals with full legal compliance. I am in excellent health, both physically and cognitively. Attached, you will find a certification from my physician confirming the same. All decisions were made independently and voluntarily. Any further insinuation of undue influence will be treated as harassment and directed to my attorney of record. Sincerely, Nora L. Beasley, Retired Administrator, Wake County General Hospital, 40 years. She reread it once, checking each line for tone. Calm, polite, airtight. Then she called Pam. "Send it over," Pam said briskly. "I'll proof it like it's a federal audit." Within minutes, they were both on speakerphone. the sound of Pam's typing sharp and rapid. "This is perfect," Pam murmured. "But let's add one more line, something that'll make their lawyers sweat." Nora smiled faintly. "Such as?" "How about, any family member listed in your correspondence is fully aware of my competence, as evidenced by their prior reliance on my financial management. That's corporate gold." Nora laughed then. An actual, full laugh, the kind that felt like exhale after years of tension. "Pam Hendricks, you should have gone into litigation." "I did," Pam replied dryly. "HR, same battlefield, smaller casualties." By nightfall, the letter was finalized, clean, attached, and sent. Nora closed her laptop, poured herself a glass of red wine, and leaned back against the sofa. The last streaks of sunset slanted through the blinds, painting the living room in thin bars of light. 2 days later, another notification appeared, this time from her phone. Pam had texted a screenshot from social media. It was Tessa, standing in front of a mirror in some boutique dressing room, one hand on her stomach, the other holding her phone. The caption: "Some people let money twist their hearts. Pray for the manipulated." Chakra elder abuse awareness, watched her truth will out. Pam's message underneath read, "If irony had an Olympic event, she'd medal." Nora chuckled, nearly spilling her wine. She scrolled through the comments. Heart emojis, vague sympathy, not one person questioning Tessa's performance. It was almost impressive, how easily some people could rewrite reality and call it concern. She put her phone down, letting the laughter fade into something softer, amusement tinged with clarity. They could post. They could whisper. They could question every inch of her independence, and none of it mattered. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind that smelled faintly of honeysuckle through open windows. Nora sat at her dining table, her coffee cooling beside a neat stack of folders. Outside, her wind chimes flickered like glass whispers, and the faint hum of a lawnmower drifted from down the street. It was an ordinary morning, except this time, ordinary felt powerful. The letter from Greg's lawyer still sat in her file cabinet, sealed away behind a labeled tab. Family Interference, 2025. She'd printed it only so she could physically close it inside something. That act alone had made her sleep better. Now, she was writing something new. Tom had suggested it during their last call, his voice steady but firm. "If you want to make this unbreakable, Nora, we file preemptively. We certify capacity now, before they ever try to claim otherwise." She'd thought about it all weekend. And now, the decision sat in front of her like an unlit candle. She picked up her pen. The office of Yates Financial and Estate Law was unusually quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made every sound distinct, the scratch of pens, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the subtle clink of Tom's wedding ring against his desk as he reviewed documents. Nora sat across from him, a calm stillness in her posture as he flipped through the final pages of what he'd prepared. "This affidavit," he said, tapping the top page, "is a legal certification of your full mental and executive capacity. It confirms that all your estate revisions were done voluntarily and with documented clarity. Once filed, it preempts any future challenge from your heirs. In short, Greg and Tessa can't contest a single thing." Nora nodded, hands folded. "Then let's file it." He hesitated, meeting her gaze. "You understand. This will effectively cut off their leverage. There's no walking this back later." "There's nothing left to walk back," she said softly. He smiled, just slightly. "I'll have it notarized in-house and delivered to the county clerk by this afternoon." As he turned to the next file, Nora noticed something tucked beneath it. A second document. Thinner. Simpler. "What's that?" she asked. Tom looked at her over the rims of his glasses. "That's your living will and care directive draft. You haven't updated it since your husband passed." She reached for it, flipping to the designated caregiver section. Primary medical proxy, Greg Beasley. She studied the line for a moment, her eyes tracing the familiar name. Then she drew a single, steady line through it. Underneath, she wrote Pam Hendricks. When she set the pen down, her hand didn't shake. Tom gave a small, approving nod. Pam will do right by you. I can have this notarized at the same time. Good, Nora said, leaning back in her chair. Let's make it official. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. The air in the office felt cleaner, lighter. She realized this wasn't revenge, it was insurance. Against chaos, against assumption, against every version of her that had ever been overlooked in favor of someone else's comfort. When Tom finished stamping the documents, he looked up and smiled. There, he said. Now you can actually relax. Nora returned the smile. Imagine that. That afternoon, she stopped at the home and garden store on Glenwood Avenue, the one with the wide aisles and the soft music that always made her want to linger. She wasn't shopping for anything in particular, but as she passed the outdoor section, her eyes landed on a teak garden bench. It was simple, beautifully crafted, smooth to the touch. The tag read, "Sustainably made, lifetime guaranteed." She ran her fingers along the wood grain and imagined it sitting beneath her crepe myrtle tree, where the afternoon light always turned gold. Without a second thought, she bought it. As the clerk loaded it into her car, she caught her reflection in the window, hair slightly wind-blown, eyes clear. Not the woman who'd once asked permission to rest or forgiveness for existing. Just a woman reclaiming space. When she got home, she placed the bench exactly where she'd imagined, beneath the shade of pink blossoms. The wood glowed in the dappled light, sturdy and unapologetic. She sat down, the seat still warm from the sun, and exhaled into the quiet. For a few long minutes, there was no sound but birds and breeze. She thought of her husband, the years they'd built, the money they'd saved, the son they'd raised, and then she let the thought pass like weather. Peace, she realized, didn't come from answers. It came from decisions that no one could undo. The first email came on a Thursday morning, hidden between grocery promotions and a note from her HOA. Nora almost missed it. Almost. But then she saw the sender's name. Greg Beasley. The subject line read, "Need to talk. Urgent." She took another sip of her coffee before opening it. The body was short. Too casual for the word urgent. "Hey, Mom. Things are kinda tough right now. Tessa's car got repossessed this week. Some mix-up with payments, but we'll get it sorted. Also, we're a bit behind on the mortgage. Just a few months. I was hoping you might be able to help us float until we're caught up. You know how stressful things have been with the baby coming. Can we talk today? Please don't ignore me. Greg." Nora reread it twice, her face unreadable. Then she set her mug down, carefully, as if even the sound of porcelain meeting wood might shatter the quiet she'd built around herself. Through the window, the spring sunlight spilled across her front lawn. The azaleas she'd planted last year were opening, small bursts of pink and white against deep green. It was strange, she thought, how easily nature bloomed again after being cut back. She closed the email tab. No reply. Not yet. An hour later, her phone buzzed with another message. This one from Tessa. "Hi, Nora. I'm sure Greg already reached out, but things are really tight for us right now. We're not asking for a handout, just a short-term loan. The bank's been unreasonable, and the car thing was humiliating. You've always said family should help each other in hard times. I know you don't want your grandson growing up with all this stress. Please call." Tessa. Nora read it once and scrolled down to the signature line where Tessa had linked her lifestyle blog. Sponsorships, mompreneur articles, affiliate links. Even now, the branding was perfect. She shut the laptop. Then she went outside. The air carried that early April warmth that hinted at summer but still smelled of rain. Nora knelt by the garden bed near her porch steps, pulling on her gloves and setting out the bulbs she'd bought last weekend: tulips, daffodils, and a few late-season crocuses. The soil was soft and dark, easy to turn. Every motion felt deliberate. Plant, cover, pat down. She'd learned long ago that tending to living things worked best when done quietly. Talking too much only startled the roots. When her phone buzzed again in her pocket, she didn't look. Not until the third vibration stopped. Then she stood, brushed the dirt from her knees and checked the screen. Another email. This one shorter. Subject: "We really need your help, Mom." There was no body text, just a single line attachment, a screenshot of their overdue mortgage statement. Nora exhaled, slow and even. Then she walked back inside, rinsed her hands at the kitchen sink, and opened her laptop once more. Her reply was composed in 3 minutes, written the same way she used to handle professional crises: clear, courteous, and final. "Greg, I'm sorry to hear you're having financial challenges. I'm confident you'll find a solution that fits your circumstances. In the meantime, I've attached links to 2 reliable resources: Wake County Financial Counseling Program, National Debt Relief and Bankruptcy Assistance Center. Both organizations are reputable and free of charge. I hope you'll reach out to them soon. Love, Mom." She hit send. Then she sat back in her chair, folded her hands in her lap, and let the quiet settle. That evening, Pam called. "Got the latest update from our favorite drama duo?" she asked. "Tessa's been all over Facebook crying about losing the car." "I saw the emails," Nora said. "And?" "I sent them help." Pam snorted. "What kind of help?" "The useful kind," Nora said evenly. "Information." There was a pause. Then Pam laughed, the kind of laugh that had always carried both pride and disbelief. "You're stone cold, Beasley. I love it." "They've used up their favors," Nora said simply. "Now they can use their options." Pam made a satisfied hum. "That's my girl. Oh, by the way, remember that teak bench you bought? I found matching planters online, sending you the link." When the call ended, Nora stepped outside once more. The garden glowed under the soft lamplight. She knelt again, pressing the final bulbs into the soil, one by one. Her fingers sank into the cool earth, steady, patient, deliberate. The envelope arrived on a Monday, thick ivory cardstock with embossed gold lettering, tucked neatly between a utility bill and a glossy home renovation catalog. Nora could tell what it was before she even opened it. The handwriting, Tessa's practiced cursive, too round, too deliberate, had the smug precision of someone curating appearances. Inside, beneath a swirl of pastel confetti and watercolor baby elephants, the words shimmered. "Join us for a celebration honoring Tessa Beasley, mom-to-be." In smaller script, just beneath the RSVP line, "We can't wait to celebrate with Grandma-to-be." Nora stared at that line for a long time. The word grandma looked almost ornamental, an accessory, not a title meant for her. She turned the card over. On the back, a QR code linked to a registry so long it required scrolling. Designer diaper bags, organic baby loungers, a $500 stroller system. She placed the card back in its envelope and set it neatly on the counter beside her mail basket. For the rest of the morning, she went about her routine, watering the porch plants, checking the bird feeder, sweeping the kitchen floor. But no matter how many small tasks she completed, the invitation seemed to follow her like a ghost, its soft white edges visible in every corner of her mind. When Pam stopped by that afternoon, sunglasses perched on her head and a box of blueberry muffins in hand, she spotted the envelope immediately. "Ah," she said, plucking it from the counter. "The royal summons." Nora smiled faintly. Something like that. Pam flipped it open, read the inscription, and gave a short laugh. Grandma-to-be. That's a bold ask, considering they've been treating you like a malfunctioning ATM for 6 months. I suppose they assume the title comes with perks, Nora said dryly. Oh, honey, they assume everything comes with perks. Pam leaned against the counter, tearing off a piece of muffin. So? What's your move? You sending a check with the card? Nora paused, looking out the kitchen window where the afternoon light cut through her azaleas in soft pink ribbons. No, she said finally. I'm sending something better. Pam arched an eyebrow. Better? You'll see. That evening, Nora sat at her writing desk, the one she'd inherited from her mother, the one with tiny drawers that still smelled faintly of cedar and ink. She pulled out a blank card from her stationery set, its front embossed with a single gold leaf. Inside, she wrote slowly, neatly, deliberately, "Dear Greg and Tessa, wishing you joy as you begin this new chapter. Parenthood is a lesson in patience, love, and humility. It will teach you more than anyone else ever could. Warmly, Nora." No check, no gift card, no note of apology, just words. Sincere, spare, and enough. Then, before sealing the envelope, she opened her laptop and navigated to the Children's Medical Foundation website, the same organization she'd chosen for her trust. She clicked Donate and entered an amount significant enough to make her smile, designating it to the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. In the comment box, she typed, "In honor of the Beasley baby, may every child be met with care and grace." She submitted it, printed the receipt, and folded it quietly into her files. Her gift, she thought, had already found the right crib. 2 days later, the fallout arrived, not by phone or letter, but on social media. Pam sent a screenshot at midnight, the text flashing with amusement. Tessa Beasley posted, "Funny how some people can afford pottery retreats and luxury benches, but can't be bothered to support their own family." Stingy elders. Generational greed. Pam had added her own commentary beneath it. If she spent half as much energy budgeting as she does hashtagging, she wouldn't need your help. Nora smiled at her friend's bluntness but didn't reply. She turned off her phone and set it on her dresser, screen face down. For the next week, she stayed offline entirely. No news, no notifications, no noise. She woke with the sun, brewed coffee the slow way, and walked barefoot through her garden each morning, dew soaking the hem of her robe. The bulbs she'd planted weeks before had begun to break through the soil, tiny green arcs piercing the dark earth, patient, unstoppable. She felt lighter every day. Peace, she realized, wasn't a thing you waited for. It was something you created. Quietly, deliberately, like planting tulips in a storm and trusting they'd find their way to the light. By mid-May, Nora's life had become as quiet and ordered as the morning light that filtered through her blinds. She'd finished the last of her paperwork, every account audited, every form notarized, every detail exactly as she wanted it. The process had taken months of precision. Line items, signatures, verifications, transfers. But when she looked at the final folder on her dining table, labeled neatly in her steady handwriting, Estate, Final, she felt something shift inside her. Not triumph, not relief, just balance. Tom had handled the filings with professional efficiency. Vera had confirmed the banking security updates personally, her note written in tidy blue ink. All accounts locked and private. Digital tracking disabled. No third-party access remains. For the first time in her adult life, Nora's financial world belonged solely to her. There were no shared names left to haunt the paperwork. Greg and Tessa's digital fingerprints had been erased like chalk after rain. The following week, she turned to something that wasn't on her to-do list, something she'd been thinking about since Sedona. She called the local community college foundation and asked to speak to their donor office. The voice on the other end sounded surprised when Nora explained her request, then grateful when she described her intent. "I'd like to set up a small scholarship," she said, "for nursing students in memory of my husband, Richard Beasley. He believed in hard work, education, and in giving quietly." They asked what she'd like to call it. She thought for a moment. Then, the Beasley Integrity Grant. The woman on the phone promised to draft the paperwork that afternoon. When Nora hung up, she felt the corners of her eyes sting, not from sadness, but from something gentler. The memory of her husband came not as grief this time, but as presence, quiet and steady. She imagined him smiling in that understated way of his, the one that always said, "Do what's right, not what's expected." And she had. That night, she sat at her writing desk once more. A sheet of cream stationery lay before her, her fountain pen poised in the dim glow of the desk lamp. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the garden outside. The letter was addressed not to Greg or Tessa, but to Ethan. She hadn't seen her grandson in nearly a year, not since his parents had decided visits were too inconvenient. He would be 12 now, curious, sharp, too old to be shielded from the truth forever. She began to write, her handwriting graceful but firm, the words unhurried. "Dear Ethan, by the time you read this, you'll be old enough to understand that adults don't always agree on what's fair, but fairness isn't the same thing as love. I want you to know that every decision I've made was mine, calm, deliberate, and with a clear mind. You don't need to worry about me or about money. Everything I had was earned, and everything I keep is chosen with care. You'll hear different versions of this story one day. Some will be loud, some will be kind. But the truth doesn't need defending. It just needs remembering. I love you, but I don't owe you. Love always. Grandma Nora." When she finished, she sealed the envelope and placed it in her outgoing mail tray beside a small labeled note for Pam. "In case of emergency, deliver to Ethan." She didn't need to explain more. Pam would understand. The next morning, Nora walked to the mailbox at the end of her street. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of honeysuckle and cut grass. Birds chattered from the telephone wires as she slipped the letter inside and raised the red flag. For a moment she stood there, her hand resting on the cool metal. Then she turned back toward her house, the crepe myrtle blossoms scattering like confetti across her walkway, her garden blooming exactly as she'd imagined months ago. Inside, she brewed a pot of coffee, sat by the window, and opened her laptop. The screen lit up with her travel planner. Her cursor hovered over her next destination. She smiled when she saw it. Portugal, 2 weeks, gardens, coasts, and ceramics. She clicked Confirm Reservation. The screen blinked once, processing the purchase. The will appointment smelled like lemon oil and old paper. Tom's conference room had a window that framed a slice of Carolina sky, the kind of soft blue that makes everything below it look composed. Nora sat with her palms flat on the mahogany, posture straight, reading the last draft of her future. "Page 3, Tom said, tapping the corner gently. "Specific bequests." Nora read the paragraph once more. The words were clean and unadorned. "Upon my death, my son, Greg Beasley, will receive a sealed letter to be delivered by my attorney. No further property, accounts, or real assets are to be distributed to him or his spouse." It looked almost spare on the page, like a quiet hallway with all the doors closed. She turned to page 4. "The bulk of your estate," Tom continued, "is allocated to the charitable designations we set up: Children's Medical Foundation, the Beasley Integrity Grant at the college, and Raleigh Food Share. Percentages are locked." Nora felt something ease in her chest, a small knot finally loosening. Richard would have approved. He had loved simple verbs. Feed, teach, heal. She initialed where the colored flags told her to, then signed in black ink at the bottom margin. Her name flowed across the paper without tremor, a steady horizon line. Tom gathered the stack, squared the edges, and clipped them under a brass weight. Last item, durable power of attorney, he said, sliding a single page forward. Financial, medical, legal, as we discussed. Pam's name sat where Greg's had once lived, Pamela Hendricks. The ink there was already dry from the witness line Pam had signed earlier in the lobby, bold and unapologetic. Nora touched the page briefly with 2 fingers, as if blessing it, then nodded. That's correct. Tom smiled, not celebratory, something else. Respect. All right, he said softly. That's your legacy. Filed today. She left the building lighter than when she entered, sunlight draping over her shoulders like a shawl she'd finally remembered she owned. Vera met her at the bank with a clipboard, a familiar private smile, a room already prepared. We'll keep this simple, she said, ushering Nora into the glass office where the rest of her life had steadily been untangled. I've closed all joint authorizations and purged legacy online permissions. We're deleting cached credentials and auto links. He won't be able to request a reset. There's nothing left to reset. Nora appreciated Vera's language, the efficient rhythm of someone who understood the difference between done and finished. They signed 3 more forms. Vera added a discreet privacy flag to Nora's customer file and, after a glance to the doorway, lowered her voice. For what it's worth, she said, I've seen families rebuild after less, but it always starts with a line no one crosses. Nora smiled, then considerate drawn. Across the desk, a small ceramic dish, some teller's child's art project, held paper clips in a messy, colorful pile. For a flicker of a second, she saw clay in that shape, her hands wet and steady, a bowl finding itself under her palms. She signed the final line. Vera stamped and dated the page, the metal clack like a small, precise gavel. Complete, Vera said, and private. Back home, the tulips arrived all at once, as if the garden had been holding its breath until the law caught up with Nora's heart. She brought her tea to the teak bench and watched each stem tilt toward the light as if it had always known where to go. Every color felt loud in the best way: raspberry, cream, yellow like morning. She thought of Richard in a hospital doorway, tie askew, bringing her coffee after a double shift. She thought of the boxy apartment they'd started in, the checkbook they'd balanced together at the kitchen table, the first time Greg rode a bike without training wheels and didn't look back to see if she was watching. She had been. She always had been. The phone vibrated on the bench beside her. A text preview flashed before the screen blacked again. Greg, you can't actually mean this. After everything, this is what I get? A letter? You're sick. You've let other people poison you. If Dad were here? Nora picked up the phone and stared at the message without opening it. The words blurred at the edges, not from tears. From the simple refusal to focus on what no longer deserved her attention. Across the yard, a robin landed on the back fence and bobbed twice, as if approving her silence. She tapped the screen, swiped left, and deleted the message unread. It felt surprisingly like planting something. She spent the afternoon labeling a slim file for Pam, the break glass in case of emergency packet, containing the will summary, contact list, a note handwritten in her neat script. I want laughter at the gathering, serve lemon bars. No speeches. She slid it into a drawer she never used because some drawers are meant for a future you only reach by being brave in the present. From the kitchen window she could see the tulips nodding in a light breeze, pink like open hands. She rinsed her mug and set it upside down to dry, the quiet of the house no longer a void to fill, but a room she chose to sit in. Her phone buzzed once more, a calendar reminder from weeks ago that she'd ignored, now bright on the screen. Spring garden, guest list. Pam's text chimed in at almost the same time. Saturday at your place? I'll bring the good plates and the soft jazz playlist. Let's celebrate the woman who finally did what the rest of us only threatened to. Nora stood at the window, tulips and teak and sky in one frame, and felt the rare sensation of rightness settle like a coat that finally fit. She typed back, yes, invite the quiet ones. The Saturday air was bright and forgiving, the kind of early summer warmth that made everything, petals, laughter, even time, stretch a little slower. Nora's backyard had never looked more alive. The tulips stood tall, a full chorus of pink and cream. Her azaleas had turned electric at the edges. The teak bench gleamed near the garden path, and small bistro tables were scattered across the lawn, each topped with mason jars filled with cut flowers. Pam arrived first, wearing a wide straw hat and carrying a pitcher of lemonade that looked too perfect not to have been filtered through Pinterest. Behind her came Marjorie from the old hospital board, then Angela and Ruth, both former colleagues who had once promised they'd see what retirement really looked like. Look at this place, Ruth said, setting down a tray of cucumber sandwiches. You could rent it out for weddings. Never, Nora said with a quiet laugh. It's finally mine. No family cars lined the curb, no high-pitched voices carried from the house. There was no one here who needed her to be a mother, an ATM, or a second chance. The air itself seemed lighter for it. Pam poured glasses and raised hers toward Nora. To the quiet queens, she said, her voice playful but edged with something sincere. To the women who stop apologizing for breathing too loudly. The others laughed and clinked glasses. Lemon and mint sparkled in the sun. Nora smiled, letting their joy move through her like sunlight through glass. To peace, she added softly. For a long while, conversation floated easily. Old stories from work, updates about grandchildren, garden tips traded like recipes. At one point, someone asked Nora what was next now that she'd officially untangled herself from obligation. Nora reached into the pocket of her linen cardigan and drew out her passport, the deep blue cover catching the light. Portugal, she said simply. Gardens, pottery, the ocean. I leave next week. Pam's grin spread wide. You didn't tell me you booked it. I wanted to make sure I'd go through with it before saying anything. Ruth leaned forward, eyes wide. You're going alone? Yes, Nora said. For once, entirely alone. The table went quiet for half a heartbeat, not in judgment, but in awe. Then Marjorie reached across the table and squeezed Nora's hand. It's about time someone did what the rest of us only dream about. Pam raised her glass again. To Nora. Proof that the world doesn't end when you choose yourself. Later, when the afternoon drifted toward golden hour, the music softened to quiet jazz. The guests wandered through the garden with their shoes off, heels abandoned in the grass. Pam stood by the rose bushes, talking with Ruth about soil pH and patience, while Nora sat back in her teak chair beneath the crepe myrtle, a cup of tea cradled in both hands, the scent of honeysuckle mixed with lavender. Bees hummed lazily between blooms. The world had stopped asking her to explain herself, and in that stillness she found something deeper than victory. Contentment. Pam walked over and placed a plate of lemon bars beside her. You've done it, she said softly, almost as if afraid to disturb the air. You've built peace that can't be taken back. Nora smiled, her gaze still fixed on the garden. I didn't build it, she said. I just stopped giving it away. Pam exhaled through her nose, half a laugh, half something like understanding. That should be on a pillow. I'd rather it stay here, Nora murmured. Unstitched. Quiet. They sat together without speaking for a while. The kind of silence that only exists between people who've already said everything that matters. As the sun began to slip behind the tree line, Pam helped stack dishes and gather the last of the glasses. The others hugged Nora goodbye, leaving behind traces of perfume and laughter that hung in the air even after the gate clicked shut. The yard, still bright with color, felt full but not crowded, alive but still hers. Nora walked the length of the garden once more, her fingers grazing the tulip petals, cool and smooth. In the kitchen, she washed the teacups by hand, slow and deliberate, the way her mother used to. When she finally stepped outside again, the first stars had started to appear, faint against the lavender dusk. She sat back down in her chair, lifted her cup one last time, and whispered a soft thank you. To no one, to everyone. Monday morning arrived with the kind of calm that used to feel foreign to Nora. No alarms, no schedules, no inbox waiting like a hungry mouth. The sunlight had slipped through her living room curtains, warm and insistent, casting gold against the framed photos she'd left standing on the hallway table. Most were from another life. Her in a hospital badge, Richard at some long-forgotten picnic, Greg as a child holding a kite that refused to fly. For the first time, those pictures didn't ache. They just were. She stood by the front door holding a small wooden plaque, her old office one, newly polished and restored. The brass plate still read, Nora L. Beasley, Hospital Administration, 1984 to 2024. Once, it had marked her office in a wing that smelled perpetually of disinfectant and coffee. Now it hung in her home, just above the light switch by the entryway. A quiet monument to the 40 years she gave to everyone else, and the year she finally gave back to herself. She stepped back, looked at it, and smiled. Not bad, she said aloud, her voice echoing lightly through the room. The house had changed with her. Her desk, once cluttered with forms and folders, now held only 3 things: her journal, a fountain pen, and a mug of chamomile tea. Outside the window, the garden glowed under a soft morning haze. She sat and opened the journal to its first blank page. At the top, in careful handwriting, she wrote the title, Boundaries, a Memoir. Below it, the first line came easily. Freedom doesn't begin when others let you go. It begins when you stop waiting for them to. Her hand moved steadily across the paper, her thoughts spilling out without apology. Not about Greg, or Tessa, or even the money, but about the slow unraveling of guilt, the long lessons of giving without expectation, the quiet art of saying no without explanation. She wrote for 2 hours, only pausing when the neighbor's dog barked or a cardinal landed briefly on the porch rail. By lunchtime, she had filled 10 pages. Her wrist ached, but her chest felt light. Pam called, her tone as bright as the spring air. Tell me you're not still working. I'm writing, Nora said. Same thing, just healthier, Pam replied. Don't forget the ceramics club meets tonight. You promised you'd come. Nora looked down at her ink-stained fingers and smiled. I'll be there. The community center was buzzing that evening, dozens of retirees laughing over spinning wheels and lopsided mugs. The smell of clay and glaze reminded Nora of Sedona, of red dust and warm wind. She slipped on her apron, tied her hair back, and took a seat at a wheel by the window. First-timer? A woman asked beside her. Not exactly, Nora said, rolling the clay between her palms. I used to do this a long time ago. I just stopped. Well, the woman said with a knowing grin, you found your way back. The wheel began to spin, the hum steady, rhythmic. Nora pressed her thumbs into the center of the clay and felt it give way, not collapse, but yield. A shape began to form beneath her hands, uneven but real. Around her, conversation rose and fell like a tide. For the first time in years, Nora wasn't trying to be perfect. She was simply trying to be present. Back home later that night, She made herself a cup of mint tea and opened her travel folder. The booking confirmation for her Portugal trip glowed on the screen. Lisbon, Porto, then 3 nights by the sea in Cascais. No shared itineraries, no group chats. Just her name on every ticket. She closed her laptop, then turned at the sound of her phone buzzing against the table. A single message from an unfamiliar number appeared. Ethan. Hi, Grandma. Mom showed me your letter. I understand now. Thank you. The words glowed soft and simple. No apology, no defense, just understanding. For a long moment, Nora stood there, phone in hand, the garden lights flickering outside the window like fireflies. Then she set the phone down without replying. Some messages, she thought, were meant to be received, not returned. Later, she lit a candle on her desk, the scent of sandalwood filling the quiet. She sat back down, journal open to the last line she'd written earlier that day. Outside, the night hummed gently through the screens, the faintest trace of rain beginning in the distance. She took a sip of tea, closed her eyes, and let the moment settle, solid and still. When she opened them again, she wrote her final line for the night. They planned my retirement for me. I rewrote it, and I didn't leave them a key. She set the pen down, watching the ink dry, and felt the truth of it settle inside her. Calm. Absolute. Nora smiled, leaned back in her chair, and watched the candle flame sway against the wall. Her new life had already begun.